Welcome to the Story Learning Podcast, regular doses of language learning tips and motivation to help you become fluent in any language. With me, Olly Richards. For language programs, books, free resources, and much more, visit StoryLearning.com.
Whoa, what just happened? After 188 episodes of the I Will Teach You a Language podcast, I thought it was finally time to get something a little bit more upbeat and lively, and just change things up, do something a little bit different for the intro and the outro of the podcast. I hope you like that. You may remember, in fact, a few months ago, I mentioned here on the podcast that I wanted to do this, and if any of you guys were audio editors or knew how to do this kind of stuff, then perhaps you could reach out and let me know. And one guy did. A really great guy, Jorge de Lima from Brazil, currently living in New Zealand, I believe. Reached out and said, "Hey Ollie, I'd love to help you put this together." He's a long-term listener of the podcast, and so I said, "Yeah, cool. Well, let's do it." And so we went back and forth for some time, and he had lots of different ideas, but I'm quite fussy, so I would say, can we change the music here, and can we turn down the music here, and can we shorten that bit? Lots of requests, but he very, very kindly kept doing the amendments that I asked for, and we've ended up with this cool new intro. So I hope you like it. I wasn't sure whether to keep making the little announcement at the start or whether I should just start immediately with the music. Who knows? But I think it's quite cool to have the number, right? So you kind of know where we're at. So that way, when you're listening in like 10 years' time, and I say, this is the I Will Teach You a Language podcast number 1283, or whatever, you're going to be able to look back and think, wow, all of those episodes. Anyway, enough of that. Listen for the outro as well. I think it's quite cool. Today, we've got a question about choosing a language. It's come up before, and here we are again with another variation on the theme. Now, let's dive right into today's question.
Hi, Olly. This is Begum from Turkey. Firstly, I have to thank you because your wonderful podcast. I always very excited before listening and while listening also, and waiting your episode with excitement. Secondly, I have a question. Actually, I'm hesitating about some issue. Is that I really want to learn Spanish. I feel I'm so quite motivated about that. And after a little search, I found that Turkish speakers like me is very easy to learn Japanese. So, do you think which one I'll learn and speak quickly? Spanish, that is I'm so motivated to learn, that's why I allow, or Japanese, that's we so easily to learn? I know it's a very long question. I'm so pleased if you answer. Bye.
Hi, Begum. Thank you very much for your question. I think that is the nicest question that I've ever heard anybody ask. And thank you so much for the compliments on the podcast as well. I'm really happy to hear that you enjoy it so much. I really enjoy making it, and so it's great to hear things like this. So let's talk about your question. Should you learn Spanish or should you learn Japanese? Now, let's assume that you don't have any particular requirement. So I'm going to assume that you don't need either language for your work. I'm going to assume that you're not married to a Spanish or Japanese speaker, or that you don't plan to move to Spain or Japan anytime soon. In other words, there's no extrinsic motivation for you to learn either of these two languages. So what we're talking about here is learning a language for pleasure or for self-enrichment. Now, you've given two criteria. You've told me that you are passionate about Spanish and you can't wait to learn it. And then you've told me that Japanese would be very easy to learn. Now, based on those two things alone, I think you only have one option. You have to learn Spanish. If you're passionate about Spanish, if you're excited about it, if you can't wait to get stuck in and to learn the language, to meet Spanish people, maybe travel to Spain, that's the language you have to learn. Okay? That's what you have to learn. Even if Japanese is very easy for you, why are you going to learn it? I mean, if you don't have any particular connection with Japan, if you're not moving to Japan, if you don't have Japanese friends around you, then are you just going to learn Japanese because it's easy? Well, I'm not sure that that's going to be a very rewarding pursuit for you overall. It might be intellectually quite stimulating for a few months as you learn this crazy new language. It's very, very different from what you're used to, linguistically and culturally, I think. But then long term, what's it going to mean for you? And what I've discovered over, for example, over the last year with Thai is that, I went to Thailand and I didn't think it was going to be easy, but I was quite excited about it. I studied Thai and then I came back to the UK, but then now I don't have any Thai friends here in the UK. I don't have any way to practice learning Thai, and it's really frustrating for me because I really like the language, but it just doesn't, like, I'm grasping at straws to try to figure out how it makes sense in my life, and so I'm kind of left with this. It's become in a way like a bit of a curse, which is a horrible thing to say, but it's not a language that I can really devote myself to because I just don't have. It's not in my life. I don't have the surroundings, and so the question is always, well, what happens after the kind of honeymoon period is over? Sure, you can study Japanese for a few months and you might enjoy it. And who knows, you might end up falling in love with it and learning it for the rest of your life and moving to Japan, maybe. If you have that kind of passion, you haven't told me about it in your question. But now let's talk about Spanish. If you're that passionate about the language, if you're that committed to learning it, if you have that much interest in it, then I'm sure it is going to have some meaning in your life. Spain is much closer to Turkey than Japan. I'm sure you have plenty of Spanish-speaking people living in Turkey. It's a relatively easy language compared to other languages. So I think really you have no choice and you must learn Spanish because the passion that you have for it will mean that you keep it up and it's going to be much more meaningful in your life. It's a very straightforward answer from me. The other comment I would make is that it's the first time I've heard that Japanese is easy for Turkish speakers. I don't know what that's based on. In my experience, there's nothing easy about Japanese. It's a very difficult language, one that never really gets any easier. The exception would be if you're Korean, perhaps, or maybe Chinese, then you have a certain advantage with Korean in terms of the grammar, and in Chinese in terms of being able to read. But Japanese is not an easy language. It takes a very long time to learn. So I would definitely investigate that a little bit further before you decide to dive into Japanese. The other thing I wanted to mention was, I'm more and more convinced that the languages we learn have to have personal relevance to us, and I've always thought this. But there was a comment left by an online colleague of mine, Richard Benton, a few months ago. In fact, it was after my Thai excursion last year, and he said that one of the best reasons to learn a language is to learn the language of the people around you in your local community. That way you can kind of add value to everybody. And he called me up on that because I didn't mention that in my Reasons to Learn Thai blog post. And it ties into my philosophy with language learning to the extent that I always learn languages that are meaningful for me. But now that I'm back in London and I'm based permanently in London, I've been thinking more and more about this. And the language that I really want to learn right now is Polish. Why? Well, because I'm surrounded by it. I don't really know anything about the language. I don't have many Polish friends. I have a few. But all the Polish people I meet are super nice. I really like them. And the language is, I also come across Polish people that speak no English at all. And so there is a clear kind of avenue there for not only for being able to practice the language and practice speaking, but also being able to be of some kind of service in the community and improve, communication. Now, I'm not sure I'm quite brave enough to do that yet because I still have so many other unfinished projects. But, the other thing that's happened recently is I've started to get more and more interested in Italian again. And those of you who know my story will know that Italian is a language I used to speak quite well, but I lost it because I learnt a very similar language, Spanish, and then didn't keep up my Italian. So I've lost my Italian, which is a real shame. Although I still understand quite a lot. But recently I've had all these encounters with Italian people. So I went to the British Podcast Awards the other day and met Francesca, who's the co-host of Coffee Break Italian. We had a long chat that night about Italian. Since then, I met, I've been, all the kind of cafes that I go to and work around London, I keep meeting Italian people who are really nice. So all these kind of signs out there that I should be learning Italian. But the reason is that I'm surrounded by it. And that for me is the most powerful reason to learn a language. So yeah, that's me kind of trying to tie this back into Bigham's question. You really have to think about that, because language learning is like a dog. It's not just for Christmas. It's something that takes a long time to nurture and to and grows with you over your life. So it has to be something that makes sense. So Bigum, in your situation, based on what you've told me, which is not that much, but based on what you've told me, learn Spanish, no question about it. I hope that's helpful. You should enjoy it. It's a great language, one of my favorite languages. If you'd like to ask me a question, you can go to iwillteachyoualanguage.com/ask. If you've enjoyed the podcast, I would really appreciate a review on iTunes as well. You can go to iwillteachyoualanguage.com/review, and that will take you to the iTunes store. Alternatively, you can just open up the iTunes store, search for I Will Teach You a Language, and leave a review there. Most appreciated. It helps other people find the show.
Thanks for listening to today's episode, and in case you didn't already know, I teach languages in a rather unusual way through stories. Now, stories are a great way to learn a new language because when you're engrossed in a story, you remember things more easily, and the mechanics of the language just start clicking inside your brain. It's quite something, and if you'd like to find out how you can learn a new language or improve your skills in a language that you already know and do it with the power of stories, then you should check out my free Story Learning Kit, which will teach you exactly how this method works and how you can use it yourself to learn a new language. Visit storylearning.com/podkit, that's PODKIT, to get free access. Inside, you'll find explanatory videos, masterclasses, worksheets, short stories to practice with, and much, much more. Once again, that is storylearning.com/podkit, PODKIT, and if you're lucky, you might also find a link in the podcast description or show notes of this episode.